And that's why you're a power mum. Welcome to the Pwrmums podcast.
I think women are so appreciative of just somebody taking the time to listen, and then when we explain what we think is going on, it just makes so much sense. And then giving them some control over how they can change things, how they can help themselves, as opposed to just maybe handing out different types of medications.
You are always talking about things that are certainly make people feel quite emotional, I guess. When we're talking specifically about women postpartum prolapse, Tamara, what are we talking about?
So basically, I might actually use the model of the pelvis. All right. Whoops.
We like props.
Do you?
That's why you film.
All right, so this is the pelvis. So this is like this on me. So we've got the pubic bone, which is in the front over here. And at the back, you've got the sacrum and you've got the tailbone over there. So if we're having a look underneath, you can see you've got your clitoris, urethra, where the urine comes out, vagina, and that's the anus over here. Superficial pelvic floor muscles, which we can remove, and we've got deep pelvic floor muscles, actually 3 layers of pelvic floor. And sitting on top of these muscles, we have our organs. Can I have the bladder, please?
Yeah.
So we've got the bladder, which sits in the front, over there. We've got our uterus, which is actually in the middle. I will show you. So that's in the middle. And then we have our rectum, which is at the back.
Such a glamorous assistant.
She's so good at that.
I love it if she passed you the wrong part. So you had to give her a look.
So what you can see is those organs are, yes, they're supported from below by the pelvic floor, but really importantly, those organs are actually supported internally by what we call connective tissue or fascia. We have connective tissue all over our body. It's like a strong membrane. It's a supporting structure. And we've got no control over that connective tissue. But for various reasons, which can be pregnancy, childbirth, constipation, lots of heavy lifting, that connective tissue can be stretched. Sometimes it can be damaged. And what happens is the support of the organ will be reduced and that organ will drop. So it could be the bladder, it could be the uterus, it could be the rectum, it could be 1, 2, or all 3. And what happens, that organ drops onto the vaginal wall, and the vaginal wall itself is actually really elastic, and it will just mold into that shape. So say it was your bladder that had lost a bit of support, the bladder would drop backwards onto the vaginal wall, and when it got to within the sort of the near the entrance of the vagina, you then can become a bit symptomatic. And what women describe is they can feel a lump or a bulge by their vaginas. Sometimes they describe and they say it feels like I've got a tampon that hasn't been pushed in properly, or I've got some panty stuck between my legs by my vagina that I can't pull out. And that's usually the most common sort of symptoms that we get. And but that's basic what a prolapse is. So it's not actually anything wrong with the organs. There's nothing wrong with your bladder. There's nothing wrong with your uterus. There's nothing wrong with the rectum. It's the support of those organs that's being reduced.
And I think some of the other things that we sometimes see are women who are struggling with how they empty their bladder and how they feel after they empty their bladder. So they may feel like they haven't fully emptied. When they wipe themselves and they get up, sometimes they can get a little trickle of urine that can still come out. And again, it's something that we can talk about certain tips and things to do to manage that. Same likewise as Tamara explained with the walls of the vagina. If the bowel has lost some of its support, you can end up getting a bit of that back wall of the vagina with less support, which then may affect how you fully empty your bladder or how you initiate a bowel motion. So these are all the things that we sort of asking women that often they haven't really thought about, and they might go, oh, I didn't even realize that was an issue. So we don't really want to alarm anybody when they come to see us, but of course we're trying to make sure that they have considered all of those things. And for some people, those are issues that they immediately bring up. And for other people, they may go, oh, I've never even thought about it, that's what it is. And we absolutely try to keep the fear factor out of it, but we have to understand what's going on there. And it may still be,
I mean, this is incredibly common, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at 50% of all women will have some amount of prolapse, but only 20% of that 50% will actually be symptomatic. Right?
So 10% of that would mean, that was some quick maths there.
Good one.
Thanks for
Impressive.
I said it confidently, it could have been very wrong. Someone will be there going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So the thing is that that's why we try not to alarm anyone, because we also are still learning more and more all the time about prolapse. So even if somebody has a stage 1 prolapse, which means it's sitting above the opening, at more than 1 centimeter above the opening of the vagina, it might stay like that for the rest of their lives, right? And they're not even aware that it's there.
Yeah.
So to wrap something like that in cotton wool, you're not achieving anything by doing that.
Exactly.
So what we need to do is assess if we think somebody's got a prolapse. We need to assess how significant we think it is. We need to assess where they are at in their healing postnatal journey, and also what they want to go back to doing. Because if I see somebody who's got maybe a stage 2 prolapse, which means it's dropped to the opening of the vagina, maybe slightly further, and they want to go back to CrossFit, I'm going to be having a very different conversation with that woman as to a woman who's saying to me, I just want to swim. And this brings us back to the 6-week check, where Monica was talking about assessing women in supine, so that's lying on your back, whereas we will often assess a woman in standing. And I always joke with my patients and I always say, this is not very glamorous. And it's not.
And then we always have a little bit of a chuckle. They look at you and they go, you do this for a job? And we are literally down on the floor, on your knees, and we are looking up at a woman's vulva and kind of having a...
I think I said, is this a bit high risk for you? Do you want me to splash guard or something?
Yeah, no, so but it's very important, because this is, as you can see, and Tamara showed you the anatomy, we have gravity, forces of gravity, and we function and do our sports most of the time standing up or with some degree of upright activity, and even your day-to-day postnatal things with your baby and your kids, and you're lifting up and bending, you are pushing, you're twisting, doing lots of things in standing. So in standing is really essential to have a look. So we were chatting about it before, that if you've been told that if you have symptoms and you have been for an exam and you've only been looked at in lying down and you've been told, oh, there's nothing there, you really may need to go and have it checked, that you need to look at it in standing.
Yeah, and actually we often see women, they come in and they say to us, I can feel something's there. I've been to my doctor, they assessed me and they said there's nothing. You're good. And then we get them into standing and we get them to do a couple of coughs in standing, and all of a sudden we can see the bulge. And even though it's not necessarily what the woman wants to hear, she feels validated. And, then she feels, okay, now I can do something about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been there. These ladies received a call from me 3 weeks after I had a baby that probably was a bit incoherent, because I had been doing the binding and because I was very vain and wanted a flat stomach. And the first day was okay, a bit uncomfortable. The second day, I felt a pressure down below. And I took a mirror and had a look, and I could see what I thought was a bulge, and was absolutely heart-stoppingly terrified, because knowing a little bit but not knowing enough is a bit dangerous. So these ladies got a phone call from me in tears saying I needed to come, I needed to be assessed, I had this prolapse, and it was a really scary time. But coming here was probably the best thing I did, because it was the most reassuring. I remember Tamara, when I did my pelvic floor contraction, yes!
Yeah, we were probably both on the ground going, yes!
But just having that reassurance from two women that really knew what they were talking about, and telling me it will get better.
Well, that's the thing. It's that reassurance, I think, is key in the beginning. Yes, and the hope, like you said, because there is hope for getting.
And I think the worst thing you can do is Google.
Yeah.
Do not Google prolapse.
No.
Oh my goodness.
It is terrifying, because I mean, like all conditions, there is a spectrum, and what you see on the internet is not in your control, and you just see horror pictures. Definitely.
And you've recovered beautifully, haven't you?
I feel absolutely. other than back issues, back to sports that I love, back to running, back to Muay Thai.
And like rehabbing from an injury, it takes time,
So
right?
This
to get
is the
back.
thing I find is I would feel so passionately for women to know 9 months in, 9 months out. Because at first I was like, categorically not. I don't even look pregnant. It's not 9 months out.
Yeah.
But it took 9 months, pretty much on the dot, 9 months for everything down there to feel back to normal.
And I think when we say 9 months, I think it's important to say, especially for those women who, like yourself, I remember talking to you about this, just how mentally, and for your mental health, I suppose, exercising is a huge thing because it makes you feel so good. It's not only about how you look, but actually, you know, some women really need their exercise to function well mentally, right? But it's not that you don't do anything. You can do a lot in those 9 months, but that it takes that long to build up, right? And so it's how you go about doing it and getting a bit of guidance and just checking out. You don't need to come and see a physio for extensive, you know, it's not a lot of appointments. Sometimes it's just that one check, maybe 1 or 2 checks along as you go along. If you're well, we just give you a bit of guidance and then
and we definitely not pushy, right? So even if a woman comes in to see us and we think they could do with some work on their pelvic floor, I will always say to a woman, I'll say, look, this is what we could do, but ultimately the woman has to put in the work, right? So we give the guidance, we tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing, we give the exercises, but we don't stand over you and say, do it.
Stand under you.
Exactly. Good one.
So, but it's never too late to come back to it. Right? So sometimes in those first 6 months or first year, there's a lot going on and you just can't, you just don't have the space or the capacity for it. But when you feel you do, you can always, it's never too late.
You know what you're talking about because you've been there. You've been new mums, but now you're experienced mums.
Yes.
So talk to me about how do you manage running a busy clinic that's growing faster than you can keep up with, as well as mumming?
Oh, you know, it's so funny because yesterday when I was talking to my daughter who's now about to become 15 and she was obviously very much, Instagram, oh my God, you're going to be on a live, on an interview on Instagram. And I said, well, this is one of the questions. And I asked, about questions about how do we manage it all. And I asked her, how do you think I manage it all? I thought it was an appropriate way to start it.
I like it.
Yeah, because, I think, we think maybe we're trying to juggle. And we're often, I think that's the thing with mums, right? We always think that we're doing not a great job in many ways, right? Because we work and we get home and then we have the kids and, it's all on top of you. But I think it constantly feels like a struggle in some ways. Some days, some weeks are better than others, I suppose. But I think, interestingly, when I ask my kids, they see from their perspective that everything is okay. I think maybe they don't know very different as well. This is how they've had it. And what my daughter said to me was, well, you're at work when I'm at school. And when I'm back in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, you always seem to be around. So that's fine. And so the reality, what happens, and I don't know, Tamara might kind of back me up on this, is that we finish work, close the door, get home, kids do whatever we need to do with kids. And then once they're in bed, we're back to the writing notes, admin. And so, yes, it's full on. We go to bed, not at the right time many times, just sort of getting the paperwork and the admin done, but it's incredibly rewarding. I love my business, and I think what my daughter and my son see, hopefully, is that I love my job and I love what I've chosen to do, and it's exciting to be running a business, but it is hard work. I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely a lot on.
And it's interesting because when we started Physio Down Under, there were a few reasons why I wanted to do this. And one, obviously, was I felt there was such a need in Singapore because nothing like this existed. And the other thing is that I wanted to sort of be my own boss, and I wanted to be there for my kids when they needed me, as opposed to sort of begging for time off. So what I've done is I think what everyone does is you prioritize what type of mother you sort of want to be. And for me, I want to take my kids to school and I want to fetch them from school. And so I've set my work hours according to that. So I drop them at work. Sorry, I drop them at school, I come to work, and as they're a bit older now, they're 10 and 12, they've got activities now after school, which I can pick them up a little bit later. And I mean, I must say, my husband does help a lot as well. But what Monica touched on as well is that, you know, it's very rewarding doing this, and yes, I do end up working at night once they are asleep. First of all, my husband's been so incredibly supportive of that. So for both my son and my daughter to see that support in a marriage is really, really important. And the other thing is for them to be proud of their mother and see what she's done and to see what hard work does. I think that's priceless. And I'm sure I dropped the ball in different places, but I think it can only be positive.